65 miles from Las Vegas sits a town you cannot visit, a place where 998 nuclear bombs exploded while families bowled in leagues and kids swam in an Olympic pool. This is Mercury, Nevada, the secret American city built to test weapons that could end the world, and today, almost nobody knows it exists. You will not find Mercury on most maps. You cannot drive there without government clearance. For 41 years, the people who worked there could not tell their families what they did each day. But this town was real. Thousands of Americans lived there. They raised families there. They fell in love there, all while mushroom clouds rose just miles away from their bowling alley. This is the story of the strangest town America ever built. A place where normal life happened next to the apocalypse, where secretaries typed reports in the morning and watched nuclear explosions in the afternoon, where the deadliest danger was not radiation, but the two-lane highway home. The story begins with fear. On August 29, 1949, the Soviet Union detonated their first atomic bomb. American intelligence did not expect this for years. Secretary of Defense Louis Johnson refused to believe it at first. But the explosion was real. Suddenly, America no longer held the only nuclear arsenal on Earth. American leaders panicked. President Harry Truman ordered development of an even more powerful weapon, the hydrogen bomb. But testing these weapons meant traveling to remote Pacific islands like Bikini Atoll. Ships sailed thousands of miles. Scientists waited months between tests. It was expensive. It was slow. It was completely impractical. Then, in June 1950, North Korea invaded South Korea. The Korean War threatened to cut off those Pacific testing grounds entirely. Los Alamos Laboratory Director Norris Bradbury called it almost fantastic that America might lose its testing sites precisely when the most rapid progress should be made in nuclear weaponry. America needed somewhere closer, somewhere. Remote enough that nobody would see, somewhere secret enough that nobody would know. The government launched Project Nutmeg, a 3-year search for the perfect continental test site. Officials examined coastlines from North Carolina to Texas. They considered Utah and New Mexico. Every location had problems. Too many people lived nearby. Weather was unpredictable. Security could not be guaranteed. Then they found it. A barren stretch of Nevada desert already controlled by the Air Force. The land had natural mountain barriers for security. Winds were predictable and would carry fallout away from major cities. The population was incredibly sparse. Only 4,100 people lived within 125 miles. Compare that to 15,000 near White Sands, New Mexico. On December 18, 1950, President Truman formally authorized the Nevada Proving Grounds. Just weeks later, construction crews arrived in the desert. But there was a practical problem. How do you staff a top-secret nuclear testing facility in the middle of nowhere? Las Vegas was 65 miles away. That meant 130 miles of round-trip driving every single day on dangerous desert roads. Completely impossible when you're trying to test atomic bombs on tight schedules. The solution was simple but extreme. Build an entire town. Construction began immediately. The Robert E. McKee Company set up a secret headquarters in a vacant Las Vegas garage. Workers poured into the desert. The first structures were simple military tents and temporary buildings. They called it Base Camp Mercury, named after old mercury mines in the surrounding hills. On January 27, 1951, barely a month after construction started, America conducted its first nuclear test on the new site. At 5:45 in the morning, a bomber dropped a nuclear device over Frenchman Flat. The weapon exploded at 1,060 feet. The Nevada test site was officially open for business. The little camp grew fast. In 1951, the government approved a $6.7 million construction project to expand Mercury. By fall of that year, over 1,100 people lived there. By the mid-1950s, Mercury had received its own United States Post Office. It officially changed from a temporary camp to a real Nevada town. The real boom came in the early 1960s. New programs demanded more tests. The Plowshare program explored peaceful uses of nuclear explosions. The Nuclear Rocket Development Station needed testing. The Cold War intensified testing schedules. Mercury swelled to over 10,000 workers, a full American city hidden in the restricted desert. What makes Mercury truly strange is how normal it became. This was not just a military base, it was a real American town, complete with all the amenities you would find in any 1960s suburb. Except the suburbs were not surrounded by nuclear craters. Mercury had an Olympic-sized swimming pool that opened in summer 1964. Season tickets cost $5, daily admission was 50 cents. Kids splashed and families sunbathed, just like anywhere else in America. Except this. Anywhere else was 5 miles from test shafts designed to contain nuclear explosions. The town had an 8-lane bowling alley called the Mercury Bowl. It opened February 1, 1964. Leagues formed, rivalries developed. Workers who spent their days preparing nuclear devices spent their evenings arguing about spare conversions. There was a movie theater in a Quonset hut. It showed current Hollywood releases like The Longest Day, Oklahoma, and West Side Story. A chapel welcomed all faiths. Rotating priests and chaplains staffed it. The Mercury cafeteria and steakhouse could seat 800 people. Workers remember the food being excellent. Beyond entertainment, Mercury had everything a self-contained town needed. A full medical clinic, a library, a barbershop, a service station with garage, a bus station, a Western Union office, laundry and dry cleaning, a printing plant. Even the Atomic Motel for overnight visitors. Sports leagues thrived. Basketball, softball, volleyball, golf, tennis, and archery all had organized competitions. The Nevada test site Bears, a fast-pitch softball team sponsored by workers, became state champions 9 out of 11 years. Nick Aquilina worked at the test site from 1951 to 1994. He eventually became manager of the Department of Energy Nevada Operations Office. He remembered the community fondly. No matter who you worked for, all the various contractors at the site, you used to refer to it as a family. He remembered the cafeteria's great food and nighttime socializing. Softball games, bingo nights, dances. Aquilina even met his wife at the test site. Love bloomed in the shadow of mushroom clouds. But Mercury existed for one reason: nuclear testing. And the tests themselves were spectacular, terrifying, sometimes catastrophic. Between 1951 and 1962, the Nevada test site conducted 100 atmospheric tests. Nuclear explosions detonated in the open air, on towers, dropped from planes, suspended from balloons. From Las Vegas hotel rooftops, guests could watch mushroom clouds rise in the pre-dawn darkness. Casinos hosted dawn bomb parties and served atomic-themed cocktails. The spectacle became a tourist attraction. Russ Fjeldstad was an Air Force lieutenant. He witnessed the Diablo test on July 15, 1957, from a trench just 4,000 feet from ground zero. His account captures what it felt like. At 10 seconds before detonation, a countdown would begin. At 0, we would experience an enormously bright light. Then the earth would shake and rock and roll for a few seconds with a deafening sound. We were told to put our hands over our eyes and bend over in the trench. The light was so brilliant I saw through the spaces between my fingers, through my eyelids and dark glasses. The shoes on the feet of the guy in front of me. The blast wave followed, a huge gust of wind blasting over our heads, away from ground zero, the precursor wave. A few seconds later, the wind returned, moving toward ground zero, the postcursor wave. This all happened in about 5 to 10 seconds. Fjeldstad watched the mushroom cloud rise to 40,000 feet, filled with what could be described as a billion firecrackers, all continuously exploding. Afterward, he showered for an hour. He threw every piece of clothing in a radioactive waste bin. He spent the rest of the day in the swimming pool. The experience was beyond belief, surreal, amazingly terrifying. I am delighted that I am still around to tell of it. If you are finding this story as fascinating as I am, hit that subscribe button right now. This channel dives deep into forgotten history that shaped our world. Stories nobody else tells. Do not miss the next one. Some tests became legendary. On May 25, 1953, Operation Upshot Knothole included the Grable shot, the only time a nuclear artillery shell was ever fired. A massive 280mm cannon nicknamed Atomic Annie launched a nuclear projectile. It traveled 7 miles downrange in 19 seconds before detonating with a 15-kiloton blast. Over 21 minutes, soldiers watched from nearby trenches. On July 5, 1957, the Hood test became the largest atmospheric explosion ever conducted in the continental United States. The 74-kiloton blast was nearly 5 times more powerful than the Hiroshima bomb. It was visible from over 1,000 miles away. An airline pilot flying to Honolulu spotted the flash. Shockwaves were felt 300 miles away in California. Perhaps most bizarre was the John shot on July 19, 1957. To prove that battlefield nuclear weapons were safe for nearby troops, 5 Air Force officers and a photographer volunteered to stand directly beneath a nuclear explosion. The 2-kiloton warhead detonated at 20,000 feet above their heads. All 6 men survived the immediate test, though long-term effects remain disputed. But not every test went as planned. On December 18, 1970, everything went wrong. The Bainbury test was supposed to be routine. A 10-kiloton device would detonate 912 feet underground, safely contained within the Earth. But the scientists miscalculated. The soil had unexpectedly high water content. John Campbell was a mining superintendent with 26 years at the test site. He was driving over Control Point Hill that morning when he saw the desert begin to bubble. Seconds later, the Earth itself ruptured. A massive radioactive plume burst from a fissure 315 feet from ground zero. It rose nearly 2 miles into the sky. Visible from Las Vegas, 75 miles away, the explosion released 6.7 megacuries of radioactive material, including 800 times the recommended exposure of iodine-131. It was pandemonium. Some miners got in the tunnels underground, and a lot of people were exposed to radiation. Campbell and his co-workers did the only sensible thing they could think of. They did a U-turn, drove to Cactus Springs and got a cold one. Between 86 and 300 workers were directly exposed. Radioactive fallout rained on Area 12, where 900 people were housed. 2 workers, Harley Roberts and William Noonamaker, died of leukemia within 4 years. Bainbury was the worst accidental venting in Nevada test site history. All testing was suspended for 6 months. The disaster changed every protocol that followed. Despite the dangers, workers like Campbell did not regret their service. I loved the romance of the job, the people, the adventure, the danger, doing things that had never been done before. He gave eulogies for 5 fellow miners who died of radiation-related diseases, but he maintained his belief. We won the Cold War. And these are the men I want to tell the story about. We brought Russia to its knees with our technology. What made Mercury truly unique was its culture of secrecy. Everyone operated on a strict need-to-know basis. Many workers had no idea what specific devices they were helping test. They built the shafts, laid the cables, performed their assigned tasks, all without asking questions. Marie Daly McMillan was an administrative secretary who worked for Lawrence Livermore Laboratory and various test site contractors. She captured the attitude perfectly. You had to keep it secret because you do not want to have other countries having it before your country. It was important for the United States to have it first. When asked what worried her most about working at a nuclear test site, her answer surprised interviewers. The only thing we ever worried about was driving fast on that 2-lane highway. She was not joking. Workers nicknamed the Highway 95 commute the Widowmaker. The treacherous 2-lane road between Las Vegas and Mercury killed enough drivers that many considered it more dangerous than the nuclear work itself. During the 1950s and 1960s, every morning before dawn, a continuous stream of headlights stretched from Las Vegas to Mercury. Workers could not tell their families what they did. Marriages strained under the weight of secrets. Years later, retired test site workers would describe themselves as unsung combatants who, faced with the threat of all-out nuclear war with the Soviets, achieved peace. But not everyone who suffered from Nevada's nuclear tests worked at Mercury. Fallout from atmospheric testing drifted across Nevada, Utah, Arizona, and beyond. Communities like St. George, Utah, population 400, received some of the heaviest contamination. On May 19, 1953, the Dirty Harry test exceeded expectations by 20 kilotons. It released the highest radioactive fallout of any continental United States test. Radiation monitor Frank Butrico's Geiger counter went completely off scale in St. George. Children were playing outside during morning recess when the fallout arrived. The National Cancer Institute later estimated that Nevada test site fallout caused between 10,000 and 75,000 thyroid cancer cases across the United States. Communities downwind saw marked increases in leukemia, lymphoma, and other cancers, effects that did not appear until 5 to 30 years after exposure. In 1953 and 1954, somewhere between 18,000 and 20,000, sheep grazing downwind developed burns, lesions, and stillborn lambs. Ranchers' lawsuits failed initially. Evidence was suppressed for decades. Actor John Wayne filmed The Conqueror near St. George in 1954. Of the 220 cast and crew members, 91 later developed cancer. 46 died, including Wayne himself. While the connection remains debated, the coincidence haunted Hollywood. Congress eventually passed the Radiation Exposure Compensation Act in 1990. It offered $50,000 to qualifying downwinders. By 2014, over 28,000 claims had been processed. $1.9 billion had been paid to victims and their families. The end came gradually, not suddenly. After the Limited Test Ban Treaty of 1963 banned atmospheric testing, all explosions moved underground. The program continued for nearly 3 more decades. 828 underground tests were conducted between 1961 and 1992. Then, the Cold War ended. The Soviet Union collapsed. In 1992, Congress passed the Hatfield-Exxon-Mitchell Amendment. It established a temporary moratorium on underground nuclear testing. President George H.W. Bush signed it on October 2, 1992. The last test, code-named Divider, had been conducted on September 23, 1992. It marked the end of 41 years of nuclear explosions at the Nevada test site. But Mercury did not empty overnight. The popular image of sudden abandonment is a myth. Workers did not pack their bags and flee. Instead, the population shrank gradually over years and decades. Some facilities were repurposed, others closed one by one. The swimming pool that once hosted summer crowds went silent. The bowling alley shut down. The movie theater stopped showing films, but essential services continued. Today, Mercury maintains a fluctuating population of approximately 500 people. A skeleton crew compared to the 10,000 who once crowded its streets. Dining facilities, a bar, a gym, and dormitories remain operational. Workers still need somewhere to eat and sleep when conducting ongoing research at what is now called the Nevada National Security Site. Mercury exists in a strange twilight, not quite abandoned, not quite alive. The site remains on standby. If nuclear testing ever resumes, Mercury would wake again. The infrastructure persists. The knowledge survives. The capability endures. The Cold War is over. The bombs no longer fall. But Mercury remains, hidden in the Nevada desert, a monument to an era when Americans watched mushroom clouds from hotel rooftops and considered nuclear war not just possible, but likely. When ordinary people did extraordinary and sometimes terrible work in service of national survival. When a bowling alley and a nuclear test site existed side by side and nobody found that strange. If this story blew your mind, smash that subscribe button and the notification bell. I cover the most insane, forgotten stories from history. Stories that changed the world but disappeared from memory. You do not want to miss what is coming next.